Jack, how are you, mate?
I'm good, Tom. How are you, dude? You all right?
Yeah, I'm all good, mate. I'm all good. So thanks for coming on. Another episode of the Diving Deep podcast.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Pleasure, mate. Get me words out. For everybody who doesn't know who Jack Wood is, I'm going to give him a little bit of an intro because we came into contact a couple of months ago when we were DJing together. So he lives in Manchester, DJ and producer, sort of been into all kinds of dance music for pretty much most of your life. DJing for many years, but really started like turning your hand to house music and what have you around about 2018. Sort of 4 years into your production journey. And you've signed some new records, which I'm sure we're going to get into, which I'm looking forward to hearing about because I don't know myself. So, yeah, mate, you've been at it.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Well, trying anyway. So we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yeah, this is it. So I suppose like the most natural place to start from really is, I suppose I want to talk a little bit about before dance music. Sort of like, where would you say your first musical influences, or where did you first get to it, basically?
Yeah, for sure. Well, to be fair, kind of like the first memories that I had about dance music and knowing that I wanted to do something was really, really early on, like early high school days.
Mhm.
I remember, I don't know what year it was, I wish I did, but I was seeing Norman Cook playing on the TV. He was in the dance tent at Glastonbury, and I just remember seeing that, like him DJing in the tent, and it was just completely going off. And I was like, that's my first kind of like early memory of just thinking like, wow, this is really, really interesting. I'm really, really like, drawn to it. And then that led me to kind of just back, I'm going to show my age a little bit, but making tape cassettes.
Yeah,
and
I know exactly what you mean.
But so just like staying up late, listening to like pirate radio stations, listening to like dance music radio stations, and literally just when my favorite tunes were coming on or a good mix or a good DJ, I was just like recording it. And then I was like kind of just knocking out like sort of tapes in school and just sort of like selling them to my mates for a couple of quid and stuff like that. So that was like, before I even started thinking about DJing, I was already sort of like, on the music hustle. But yeah, I just did it because I had a passion for it. And I knew early on that I liked dance music and just a kind of a music fan. That then kind of like just, I remember sort of like as I was coming to the end of sort of like high school, I did like a summer DJ course and did little things like that. And that just really like spurred me on to get my interest over the summer. And then from there, I remember saving up my hard-earned paper round money back in the day to buy myself a first pair of decks when I was like about sort of 15 or 16 or something like that. Some classic Gemini belt drive decks, which
Yes, mate, love it.
I don't know if you've if any DJs have started on belt drive, but you definitely get an appreciation for mixing if you can mix on belt drive decks.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's where it all kind of started, and I just like I say, I just knew I kind of went through college, just kind of went through a bit of a hip hop R&B phase, kind of liked, and then I got massively into hard house, and I had like a friend who was quite inspired me to get into like hard house, and I did that for a number of years and stuff. And then that just kind of like developed over the years, and gone from a few different music genres, got into like sort of more European hard style and things like that at the time. But then as I kind of like sort of grew a little bit older, like my sort of taste matured a little bit, and then I just like started going to like Ibiza and just like listening to like people like Carl Cox and people like that on the sort of like house techno scene, and then Salado in Manchester.
Yeah,
massive sort of like movement in Manchester towards sort of like sort of tech house music, and that I just thought, actually this is where my passion lies. So that's kind of where it's brought me up to now.
Yeah, man. I mean, obviously we're a very similar age, mate, and there's so many things that you've just said. I mean, even just going back to the first one about watching, Fatboy Slim at Glastonbury. I can remember watching it myself, and that would have probably been like in we'd say like 2000 or something like that, 2001.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but Do you remember he did that thing called the Big Beach Boutique?
That's it, mate. Yeah, I remember watching that.
No, I
Yeah,
can remember at that time, and I can remember thinking to myself, like, that is when I first got into DJing. And I can remember thinking, fucking hell, like, whoa, like, there's this one guy on that stage with a set of turntables, and he's got like God knows how many thousands of people, and he's commanding the whole thing. And it was obviously, it was all vinyl then and everything. And I just thought, this is amazing, you know, and it really, it, I think like it's very different to how it is now. Like you say, I was exactly the same. It's like now, obviously, information in itself is so plentiful. If you just want to find out about DJing, it's at your fingertip. Boom, bang it in YouTube. You can, but like the time we're talking about, like it wasn't on the TV at all. You didn't see, you know, you had to actually go to things, and if you were too young for it, it was about like I say, tuning into radio. I mean, I used to listen to like the Essential Mix and that almost weekly, because that's how you like found out what tunes you were into. And different, it's a different world, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like I say, I knew I was into like dance music and in general well before I could, years before I could even go to a club. So yeah, definitely it was it's something that I just knew instantly that's kind of like where I wanted to go. And yeah, I had all my saved money was going, like I remember going like college and on free periods when other people were going to the pub and spending their like, you know, kind of like part-time job money in the pub. I was like walking about 3 miles to the nearest record store and just sort of like spending the afternoon in there picking out records, and just could spend a good few hours, and most of my sort of spare money on records and stuff. So yeah,
mate, exactly the same. I mean, I don't know how you felt about this, but I had a couple of mates that were into it, but most of them didn't stick it out. It wasn't. I didn't know loads of DJs at my age. I've got to say, I felt like I was like maybe like I had say one or two mates, and they didn't really go anywhere with it. They just dabbled in it a bit. One of them, I brought my first set of Technics off of actually years back. But did you feel the same, that it was like you were more, it was more exclusive as such?
Yeah, I'd say definitely at first. You know, when I was sort of like in like high school and college, I didn't really have like a network of people. I would be the guy, you know, if there was a college party on, I would be the guy that would DJ at it. I'd rock up with my decks and set up and play after parties and all that kind of stuff. Or I didn't really start networking until like kind of later on. However, I did know, I got to know, there was quite a well-known hard house DJ, which is called Andy Whitby. And he actually went to the same high school I went. He was a couple of years older. He was a few years older. So I didn't really know him in high school, but then like after high school, he started becoming quite big on the hard house circuit. And he actually coincidentally lived in my village where I was living at the time. So I kind of got speaking to him a little bit. And then, you know, this was like when I was like sort of 17, coming on 18. And he was like, yeah, sound, you know, come with me to a club. So I remember he took me to the Sanctuary in Birmingham and different clubs. And he went to Evolution Club in Leeds and stuff. And he was doing these big gigs and stuff. And I was like, kind of like, that kind of like inspired me quite a lot to get into the scene and stuff. And you know, he's I still speak to him now and again as well. He's moved down to London now, so I don't see him as often, but definitely, you know, sort of speak to him now and again on Facebook and other things and stuff. And you know, it's just like you do start building out that network of people throughout your career and as you go along. But yeah, certainly when it was in the early days, it was just a passion that I was into. And back in the day, you just had to be a bit of a geek to want to be a DJ.
I agree with that actually. It's the hard house thing. I was exactly the same, mate. When I pretty much first got into DJing and buying records, I would say that actually I'm talking about like probably like 2000 at this stage, or 2001 maybe. I would say that hard house was probably the most popular genre at that time. It was like it was fucking massive, wasn't it?
Oh, it was up there. I mean, there was trance and hard house was kind of like the main two kind of staples
Mm.
are around about that time. Yeah, for sure. I mean, they were packing out, 5,000 capacity clubs every weekend up and down the country. You had all the clubs in London were supporting Hard House Nights. You had big clubs up north, like Tall Trees, for instance. I mean, how many did that hold? That was it's got to be at least 7,000 or 8,000 people, and that was like once a month at least. So it definitely was a big big genre at the time. 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I've still got loads of my Tidy Tracks vinyl and that, because I've never thrown it away. I mean, when was the last time, mate? When was the last time you listened to any of that music?
I mean, quite a while ago. Yeah.
Mate,
I mean, like I unfortunately, to save space and also some money, I sold my decks many years ago. But yeah, like I say, I've never sold my vinyls, and I think someday I will get myself a little Technic set up again, and just so I can have a dabble on them. But yeah, 100% can't sell them. It's my pride and joy collection.
Mate. I mean, there's a particular record that I've got. It's on Nucleus actually, and it's called Injected with a Poison, and it's by Praga Khan.
Yeah, I've got it. I've got the same one, mate.
Fucking hell, mate, honestly.
Poison.
Yeah, like I put it on. It's
got like a kind of, it's like a kind of like acidy bass line that sort of follows. Yeah.
It's about 160 BPM as well. It's mad. At the time, I didn't. Well, obviously I knew it was hard, but I mean, like, in comparison to house music, it's just like, it's a mental genre. Hard house is, so simple as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's just, it's one of those classic things, isn't it? Simplicity works. So if you can make a good hook, decent kick and bass line, and a couple of hi-hats and claps and stuff, it's keeping it simple does work in that sort of genre. 100%. Yeah.
So just moving on, mate. So how would you describe your current vibe as a DJ and producer?
Yeah, sure. I mean, probably stemming on from things like the hard house. I'm always upbeat. I like an upbeat tempo. I mean, if I'm warming up, I probably would start a little bit, but my preferred style, what I want to play out, the music that I make is all upbeat, quite energetic. Can I range a little bit from like happy melodies and euphoric to like kind of like a little bit more dirty tech house. But it's really kind of, the music that I really like is when you just listen to a record and it gets the party started. You can put it on, it puts everyone in a good mood, everyone's like feeling the positive vibe from it. And yeah, it's just the kind of music that you put on at a party and people can instantly get like a positive reaction from it. I think that's the kind of like aim that I've got with my music at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we'll probably come on to talk about it actually, but obviously I know you've done a bootleg or an edit of Adele, which has got quite a bit of good publicity, which is amazing. I've played it quite a few times in my live streams and what have you. People love it, mate. So we'll get onto that though. But yeah, it's wicked, mate. So I know exactly the sort of vibe that you're describing. And from a production standpoint, how did even wanting to start making records come about?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I've DJed for quite many years now, from different genres. When I got into house music, and I kind of like had a little bit of a break from just DJing. I used to go DJing like almost every weekend. It was like I loved it. But then I kind of wanted to sort of slow down a little bit. But then I thought, when I got into like house and tech house music, I kind of thought, well, I really want to do this, and this is something that I want to get involved with. And I wanted to take a little bit of a step back from the DJing, and so I looked at like artists and thought, production really is where it's at to make a name for yourself. And it's something that maybe in previous years I actually shied away from because I didn't feel like I was that sort of technically minded. I liked DJing, vinyls and CDJs and all that, but I didn't think, maybe I shied away from the production. But as I kind of got older, I realized that actually you can teach yourself all this. And also there's a lot more knowledge available on YouTube. You know, if you Google YouTube production techniques now, you just literally, you could never even watch all of them in a million years. So there was a lot more information available. Plus also, I just seen it as like, that's the way to kind of go to grow yourself as an artist. I still love DJing, but there's only so much you can do with that. And I think it was the right time for me to look at something new. And I actually went round to a friend's house, an old friend of mine. Again, he used to be into hard house, but he started learning to produce, and he'd been producing for a couple of years, just all self-taught. Went round to his, and we had a catch up, and he showed me his setup, and he showed me some tracks that he was making. His artist name is Scratch Howler, and I was blown away. I was like, you've taught all this yourself? Like, these tracks are really, really good. They sound mega. They sound really, really professional. And he was like, yeah, sure. He was like, come down another day, and we'll make a track together. So I did, and we followed up on it, and I come with all these ideas and samples and stuff, and we made a couple of tracks together. And yeah, it went really, really well. And I just got the buzz from that. And I thought, like in a way, like if he can teach himself, then that gave me the kind of the confidence that I could probably do this as well. And then that's where I really just thought, I'm gonna put my mind to this. I'm going to invest some money into it. I'm going to buy myself a decent Mac. I'm going to get myself the setup, and so yeah, just dove straight into it and never looked back. Really, that was like 4 years ago. Yeah, it does take a lot of time and a lot of patience at the beginning stages, but I would say now over the past sort of 12 months or maybe 16 months is where I've really started to feel like I'm getting to the sound that I want to make and represent as an artist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's mad, mate. I mean, there's been such a huge swing in the industry. Like when I first got into this, DJs, I mean, we're talking about a similar time here. So like 2000, 2001, I started listening to dance music in the late 90s, but DJs, they did make records, and they did, but not the way they do now. I mean, they pump them out, and they have to because they have to remain, active all the time. But like even the hard house guys, they make like a couple of records a year, maybe not even that. Sometimes it was like, now it's not. I don't know. I suppose I'm interested in your take on this. It doesn't really feel like it's so much about the DJing. Like back in the day when I used to go to events when I was like 18 and that, a lot of the DJs, even if they did make records, and a lot of them just worked with engineers, so they'd say, oh, I want to make a record like this. And the engineer that actually knew how to use all the hardware and that, would be like, and they just go through the process with them. I don't even recall them playing all their own records and stuff like that. They didn't seem to do that as much. Whereas now where it seems to have transitioned to is they're almost like I say, it's not about DJing, it's about being an artist now. And it's almost like being a musician on stage, because a lot of the guys that are obviously at the top end, that they're basically, for most of their sets, they're just playing their own tracks. And that's actually what the people want.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think
it's how it once was.
Yeah, definitely. There's just, I mean, if you actually rewind it right back to like the early sort of like 90s raves and kind of like the kind of music and DJs were popular because they had a platform. They knew somebody who could, was throwing a party, and they could just be a DJ, and they were literally just getting white labels and playing these white labels and promoting themselves on, pirate radio stations. I mean, that's how it started. And it was all about them as a DJ being able to get access to the music and have a platform to play it. And that's how they became built. I mean, that's pretty much how Carl Cox has built his early days of his career.
Weren't through the records he released, was it?
Exactly. No, exactly. Whereas nowadays, the access to music has completely changed. You can listen to anything on Spotify and all the other streaming platforms, etc. So DJing alone and having the tracks isn't really a special thing, and pretty much anybody can buy any track at any point off Beatport. Anybody can just go and listen to these music at any time. So that niche of a DJ being just someone who mixes really good records and is known for that's the source of music has changed. So what it's now more developed into, along really with the kind of culture, is the being a brand, and I think that's actually really important for anybody who's looking to get into it, is because you need to be a brand, you need to have your socials, you need to think about releasing music, have like something like an almost like an identity that backs everything up. And so your brand, your identity, your music all kind of says something about you as a person, and that is what now people connect with. They don't listen, they don't follow, you don't follow a DJ because they've done the best mix in a club. They follow you because they like you as a person, they like the music, they like your viewpoint on life, what you stand for. And there's like techno guys out there that are really like minimalistic and have that kind of like image where it's super cool. Or you get like artists like, for instance, like John Summit, who's just absolute party guy, and just loving life, and people buy into that because they want to do that, they want to be a part of that. And it's absolutely, those are the things that you actually have to think about as an artist nowadays. But I think I quite enjoy it. I think that's quite a nice thing. I think you get to show more of your personality. Socials can be tough to get around, especially when you're starting out and stuff, as I'm finding. But I think having it as a full package and having your music identify with you as a person is a great thing. I think that's like I used to love DJing on the but being able to make my own records, being able to make a sound that I really like, and then when I play that out and I see people enjoying that music, that's next level sort of feeling, like it's something that I've kind of created, which is very, very satisfactory as well for me.
Yeah, it's mad, mate. I mean, like you say, going back to the era at the start, which we're talking about, the most that I knew about the people that I really admired was going to the newsagents and buying DJ Mag and looking through there, and you might get a few photos and an interview. That was it. It was about the mystery. It was about the fact that you didn't really know. I'd be like, Masters at Work from fucking New York City. I'd be like, wouldn't it?
These guys,
about them. Do you know what I mean? I didn't know anything. I'd never heard them speak. Now, I think when I look back, the minute that things like MySpace and that started, like the old first sort of social media thing came about, the minute that you could almost like create a website for yourself that was social and say, this is actually who I am, and then YouTube came along. And then the minute that you could go on YouTube and you could say, oh, this is who I am, and I sing or I make music and that, and there was nobody to say, no, you can't, almost like prior to that, to get an audience, somebody would have had to have said, yes, okay, we'll help you create that audience. Then the whole world opened up and it was like, no, you can just go on YouTube and do a bit of singing and a load of people might like it. And I think as soon as that happened, everything changed.
No, 100% it did, because like you're saying, it's open market. You don't have to, as a DJ, back in the day where you had to go and invest time, go to a record shop, listen through to a load of promos on vinyl, sifting through. You didn't have Beatport charts. You didn't have charts. You just that you were responsible for looking at through every single record. Whereas now, you've got so much more accessibility to music. People have got more accessibility into your life, and people just get to know you as a person much more. So of course that's definitely driven like a big culture change in being an artist and being a DJ. 100%.
I think like the way, because it's funny enough, I was speaking to somebody about this the other day, and the only way I can describe it is when it got to a stage where somebody could actually make a living out of not actually providing a service, selling a product, just being them.
Yeah.
And businesses, because of the fact that people are into just them as a like their personal brand or an influencer, the minute that businesses clocked onto the fact that, hang on a sec, this person's got fucking, 200,000 people, 1 million people watching them. What if we get them to say, oh, and by the way, if you like such as that, just yet again, it was another evolution. So like that has crept into the music business, that now you're absolutely right, to be an artist, really, to get any level of notice, you actually have to show people behind the curtain, don't you, of actually you and what you do and how your days are. I've got to be honest, mate, I never would have predicted that if you said that to me like 20 years ago. I'd have been like, nah, like, why the fuck would you want to do that,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's mad, because you don't think, I think technology is often the catalyst on changing like social behavior and the way that like, things work, obviously. And before you know what that technology looks like and how you're going to interact with it, like you don't really foresee things changing in your own mindset. I mean, there might be people out there that do, but that's not me. But like, I think the average person just sees what's in front of them and just predicts that out. Whereas when something does change, it can open up doors, and it sort of inspires people to do things differently. And I think that's definitely what happened. Yeah.
Can I ask you about, because it is actually an interesting subject, the social media situation, because we, like I said, are a similar age, so we've grown up on both sides of the fence.
Yeah, sure.
Without it and with it.
But absolutely. Yeah.
As a DJ, producer, artist, how do you feel? How, in respect of comfortability, how do you feel about it? Because obviously, like I say, showing people bits about you and that. How is it? How have you found it, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, sure. Kind of more recently, much better. But I think when it first came about, I wasn't really utilizing it as well as I could, for sure. Probably still not, but like I think still everyone's on like a bit of a learning curve with it, like what works, what doesn't work. And I think in the early days of like when Facebook sort of like came about and stuff, I probably was a bit of a technophobe, really. I liked what I used to like. I used it a little bit. And then when Instagram came out, obviously got an account and stuff, but I didn't really use it as an artist. I was more just using it for my personal use and stuff. And it's only really within the last, say, like maybe 2 to 3 years that I've actually started taking my social media sort of more seriously. It was kind of roughly after I started producing, and I realized actually we need these platforms to be able to get your music out. But what a great way of sharing your music, what a great way of building up contacts with people. I've got, people that I've reached out to on my social media, where I'm now friends with them and I speak to them on a daily basis. There's a producer called Cardex from New Zealand, and I pretty much speak to him like every other day, and he plays my tracks on the radio over there. And and this is all just through social media and just reaching out to people or commenting on a post that I like, or they comment on mine. And it's another level of being able to connect with people. And really, I think as well, especially over like the last 2 years, if it wasn't for social media, and we'd all been locked down and stuff like that, then you really would have been extremely limited to how you can actually meet people and to kind of like, actually communicate with people. So I think it's been really, really key. And that's what's kind of like helped me understand it a little bit more and use it a little bit more as well. And sort of just, you can get a lot of benefits from it. But I mean, I'm no master at it myself, but it's still a work in progress, but I'm certainly getting a little bit better with it sort of all the time, really.
Yeah, it is a great tool, I've got to say, and you're absolutely right in what you're describing. You almost think like prior to social media, how the hell did musicians actually get out there? I suppose it would have just been hiring like a team or a publicist, or it would have been probably quite difficult to self-promote.
Like magazines, at one point you relied on magazines and flyers and like radio stations and things like that. I mean, they all still exist, but that's what it was. That was the main source of information at the time. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about DJing because I know you've been DJing for quite some time. So any memories of, let's have a bit of fun to start off with. Any of your worst DJ gigs that come to mind?
Oh, probably quite a few. I think we've all been there when we've just finished a mix and then we've pressed stop on the wrong record and the whole nightclub goes silent and other things like that. So yeah, but other than that, I mean, I think everyone goes through those early days of making those mistakes. People that probably still do, I guess. But no, nothing that was too horrendous, I guess. But yeah.
Any standout gigs that you look back on and think, wow, that was actually really, really good?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like it's kind of like probably going back to some of my sort of like hard house days and stuff like that. I used to play at a night called Parley Vu, which was in Bradford, but it was like a massive underground club. It's actually like an old cotton mill, and it's just like the basement of it. It was huge, and I managed to get like a peak time slot playing before the Tidy Boys, and
Wicked.
that was so wicked one there. And then I also played a festival called Cloud9 Festival. That was probably one of my biggest gigs, and it was like probably a tent, probably a couple of thousand, like kind of thing. But like there was other big DJs on, like Amber D, Mark E.G. and people like that. And that was like and it was really a good one, that, because it was quite local to me. So literally I had probably about 50, 60 of my mates all there right at the front as well, like absolutely going wild and stuff. That was like a big gig for me that I just remember being like, oh, it was one of the special ones. But yeah, there's just so many. I mean, recently I've been playing for a house night called The Zoo, which is local to me. And yeah, that's got a wicked vibe to it. Really like that. But yeah, there's just so many that you probably could sit here all night just reeling them off which ones are the best, but you always feel like the best at the time. But yeah, definitely loads and loads.
So any standout moments for you so far? I appreciate you spoke about a little bit about DJing, but from your own artistry perspective, anything that sticks out?
Yeah, I mean, I guess really you kind of touched on before that my first, because I haven't really put out any music as such. I've put out one free release so far on my SoundCloud, and it was the Adele sort of like bootleg, and I sent it to a few DJs and they liked it, and I thought, right, you know what, this might be my first record to put out, and I just put it out on there, hyped it and did all that. Didn't really do any promo for it other than just used Instagram sort of just to poke people to it. And then it just got a really good response. I mean, it's now on like 10,500 plays, which is it's been up for a couple of months. It's had like 800 downloads. So, it was my first kind of record that I've put myself out there and people don't know me from Adam. I felt that was like a really good starting position. It was a really good starting point. And then I kind of gave me the confidence, right, I want to start releasing records on proper labels now. I feel like I'm at the stage now where I feel like my music is can stand up to other sort of like records that I'm hearing on some of the sort of like pretty decent labels. So I started sending them out, and I've now got sort of 5 tracks already signed to come out, starting first one is actually going to be out on the 25th of February, so pretty soon. And I've got another sort of 4 on top of that, and then I'm also kind of in talks with a few other labels about signing a few more. So my goal is to try and get sort of 12 out this year. If I can get 12 records out in the first year, I feel like that would be a really solid release strategy. So yeah, so feeling pretty proud with that, really. Just being able to get start with something, and sort of like about it's taken me a good number of years to kind of find my sound and to get a good quality of my music. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I'm feeling quite good about it,
mate. It's amazing. I mean, sort of like going back to the beginning with the Adele bootleg, it's a great way. And like, if there's any like people that are just getting into production or anything like that, obviously, once you're happy with what you're doing,
Yeah.
actually, like, I'm a massive fan of an edit, mate. I really am, or a bootleg, whatever you want to call it these days, because especially if it's of a track that people know and can relate to, it's a really easy way to get a lot of people knowing who you are quickly. Whereas if
Oh,
you put out your own music that's just your own, it's actually, I think it's quite a lot harder. Like, really, to be honest with you, if I could speak to myself a few years ago, I'd have probably, for the first year of releasing music, I would have put out maybe quite a few bootlegs and just got the momentum going on it and started getting people interested in what I was doing.
yeah.
So I think it's actually probably, in hindsight, it's turned out to be like a bloody smart move, mate.
Yeah, well, I mean, it definitely gets your name knocked out. I'm going to do a shameless name drop here, but last weekend, somebody who I know was in America was just at like an after party with MK, and he said he played my track, and MK just like came and was like, oh, who did that? Who did that Adele bootleg? And he was like, yeah, drop my name. So, you know, it's those sort of things that, do you know what I mean? Like you get the sort of, bigger DJs when they hear like a popular song that's been remixed well, or bootlegged well, should I say, you know, it can just get you into the right kind of circles, and, you know, people start taking you notice. And then once you've used that as a platform to kind of get your name out there a little bit, you can then support that and put out your own material, which kind of like is what I've done now, and starting to get a bit of traction with it. So yeah, 100%.
Especially, and like the Adele bootlegging which you've done, I think it's probably quite on brand for the sort of vibe that you're looking to release anyway, isn't it? So like,
Yeah.
especially if the edits you do actually have your imprint on there for the sound that you're looking to make in your own records, it's like a double win. And mate, I don't give a shit about shameless name dropping, but pretty sure didn't Diplo?
Yeah, a few months ago, Diplo picked it up, and it's on these. I think it's called Rave Revolution Radio, but that's now been in their playlist. I think it's in their A playlist, so it gets played like several times a week. That's been in there now for quite a few months, probably about two and a half months. So, and I keep on getting random people kind of just like driving along, listening to the radio, and it comes on, and they're like, "Oh yeah, my buddy from the UK." So yes, it's definitely kind of helped get my name out there a little bit as my first track. So yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Amazing. So what would you like the future to ideally look like for you from a music standpoint?
Yeah, definitely. I think with my music, I feel like almost, you know, every record, I don't know if every producer feels like this, but I feel like with every record that I'm making, I'm getting better, and it's more quality. And I feel like I want to get to a position where, you know, I can listen to my music, or other DJs are playing my music, and it stands up to some of the, you know, to the big names in the industry. And I don't, you know, I might not be quite there just yet, but I think that's obviously one of my big goals, is to make sure that the music that I'm putting out there is to the best of my ability, and sort of make a bit of a name myself. And then really kind of like the longer term goals would be to release on some big labels, some, you know, have like tracks on, you know, potentially things like what would be my ideas, like Defected, Repopulate Mars, Tool Room, you know, kind of like, you know, your big independent labels, Armada, for instance, Axtone, all these sort of like big labels where they only really release credible artists. So, you know, you've got to kind of like work your way up to that kind of like standard. 100%. But kind of like, you know, sort of like a dream or a passion of mine is to eventually like make a record that just stands that test of time. Yeah. You know, like one where, you know, even years down the line, people remember that record. And it's not just from a position of like, you know, making more money or anything like that. It's more just to do with like having like an imprint on the music scene. Legacy. Like, yeah, exactly. And that's obviously like, you know, there's a lot of DJs, there's a lot of producers, really, really talented people, but to be able to actually make it to that standard where, you know, people all around the sort of globe know a particular track or sets of tracks from DJs, you know, that would be like the absolute ultimate goal where I'd like to get to, and sort of like have like quite a big impact on the music scene. And I know that I'm probably quite some way off that yet, but you know, that's where I'd like to get to, and that's like kind of the bigger dreams.
Yeah, mate, it happens all the time. I mean, don't be wrong. I don't want to take away from the fact of probably how hard it actually is to like make that happen. But I mean, if you look at a recent one that I can think of is Ewan McVicker.
Exactly.
Guy that, you know, Tell Me Something Good. You know,
what a tune.
Yeah, wicked tune. He has put out quite a few records previously, but obviously that particular tune, you know, obviously on a good label, and it just went woof.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's probably changed his whole life, you know, in one record. I mean, it is a good tune. I mean, do you know, it's an old sample from a Shaka Khan record. Yeah.
I actually stumbled across it myself.
Really?
Probably about 3 or 4 weeks after it got released, and I wasn't even looking for it. I was just on like an a cappella website, and then it's just like, it's actually really slow. It's like,
it is,
good. And I was like, no way, he's absolutely,
because he's had it re-sung, hasn't he?
It's just like, he's like, use that. Well, you know what? I mean, I'm not even sure. He might have just been able to edit it in a certain way, but
had it re-sung.
But it's you know, sort of word for word and sort of tonality, it's almost exactly the same. And I was like, yeah, fair play for being able to listen to a record. And you know, some people say, oh, it's a sample, and he's just sampled it and put a beat over it. Well, you know, you tell me who could listen to an old record that's, you know, probably half the speed of what he's probably playing it at, but also just being able to be inspired to get the drums that will fit it, the vibe of the track. It's so much more than just, you know, I do hear a lot of like sort of tech house remixes where they just take a vocal and slap some drums on it, and you can tell the difference. With his tune, he's really thought about the structure of the track. He's really thought about like how the bass line works and interacts with the vocal, and really has this like big moment where he actually doesn't bring the hi-hats and stuff until like halfway through the record. Like no one does that, but it just works so well with how he managed to do it. And it's having that inspiration, it's having the insight to take something and make it your own, and make it like, that's his tune. Do you know what I mean? I don't care who, whatever, but that, like that, you know, if you hear that record, he's made it his own 100%.
It's an art, you know, like, do you know, this is a bit of a bone of contention for me, because nowadays I feel like people give sampling a bit of a bad rep. And like, you know, if you get something from a sample back, or you sample it off an old record, almost, okay, I'm probably exaggerating, but loads of the most classic house records there has ever been are all sampled from old records, or samples from something.
Just look at Daft Punk. I mean, like the absolute overlords of kind of, you know, French house. I'm pretty confident every one of their records has some form of ripped sample from
something,
you know, disco, Motown, something, a bass line from some random track, you know. And you know, they've just, back in the day, that's how you did it. The Prodigy were the same, you know, just sampling up records and revamping it. You might do a different mix on it or however, but blending those samples all together to make your own track. And you know, they're almost unrecognizable until you actually sort of play them, you know, A/B them together, and you go, oh, actually, yeah, that is from that or whatever. But it's how it's always been.
100%. I mean, mate, if you get the chance, there's a wicked, and a bit of a shout out to another YouTube channel here, a guy called Felix Leiter. He's a DJ and producer himself. He does this show called Show Me the Sample. Have you ever?
Oh right, yeah.
Wicked. It's mate, honestly,
that's my jam. That is. I love that.
Yeah, mate. proper nerdy. I'm sorry if anybody listens to this and not actually a music producer, because they're not going to find it interesting at all. But, you know, like there's a couple of Fatboy Slim episodes on there, and oh my god, you know, what an absolute genius.
Exactly, yeah, because that's what it is. It's having the inspiration to take something and manipulate it and make it work within a dance record or whatever you're doing with it. Yeah, I mean that in itself is an art, because you can get samples, but then it's layering it with the right kick drum, making it crafting it into a dance record isn't the easiest thing in the world, as I'm sure you know as well.
The thing is, I mean, I say this and I'm open about it. I get bored of just working with like synths and plugins and that. And actually, do you know what? If I find a good sample in a sample pack or somewhere else and that, and I think I like that, I don't care. It does not bother me one bit. Like, I know people are like, oh, that's from a sample pack. I'm like, well, you can also make a tune from it as well. And it's like, I just find that just working with like, I mean, I'm quite a simplistic producer, mate. I have a MIDI keyboard. And I basically, apart from that, everything's in the box for me. I don't use hardware, and I might get into it, but it's just, I don't know. It's never been a massive interest point for me. I'm not the sort of person where I've got like 12 synths in the background. I'm not to that level of nerdiness, to be honest with you, at the minute.
I don't know how people afford it either. I mean, synths aren't cheap as well. Often, you can.
I think it all depends, like, how you've learned how to make music. I mean, like when I was learning, I learned everything in the box. So therefore, like, I suppose if you're from an era where that wasn't the case and everything was hardware based, then I suppose that's just the style in which you carry on with.
How you've learned, how you know.
100%. I mean, mate, I draw notes in. I don't even use my MIDI keyboard all the time. I'm just like, well, I don't need to. I can just draw. I know what I'm trying to do. But I find I'm gonna get loads of shit for this if
yeah, I know, yeah,
the right enthusiast. But I personally find that I get bored of just working with like synth plugins and that, and I just think, do you know what? Like, rather sometimes, if I'm looking through Splice and that, and I find a pack and I have a listen through, and I think, oh, that's quite cool. I've never heard that get used. I'll always Shazam it, because I always think, I wonder, has anybody else used this? And I just think, well, do you know what? If I beat them to it and the record does quite well, unlucky. You know what I mean? Like, you choose.
Well, I'll give you an example of what's literally just happened. This record that's coming out on the 25th. Mm-hmm. So I actually used a Splice vocal sample on it. Yeah. And it was a wicked sample. I mean, really, really good. And it's been signed to Mixmasters Red. However, what they said is that the vocal has been used before on a previous record. So what they said is that, can I get that vocal resung? Can I change it? Can I do something about it? And it was the main theme of the record. So I actually I've actually gone away and sort of found different vocalists and got some different people to demo vocals for it. And then I've managed to find somebody who's got a really, really good timbre. Her name's Emily Rachel. She's a really, really good vocalist. Yeah. And then she came up with some lyrics. I liked them, but I wanted to tweak them. So I kind of like co-wrote them. So kind of over a bit of a process, bit of back and forth, we kind of like rewrote the lyrics together. And then she's recorded that, and then I submitted it back to the label, and they're like, yeah, perfect, we'll take it. Yeah. So sometimes, diving in and using a sample just to kind of get your ideas down and you can use it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have to use that as your final product. You can definitely always go back to a record and kind of use that as inspiration. But then drive it, as like a theme for the song, but then you can change it always down the line if you want to, and you can always make. So that's literally how my first record's been signed. Yeah,
I mean, for anybody who spends quite a lot of time in Splice, as we probably do, I can think of quite a lot of records in the last few years that have had stuff from Splice. It's like, do you know what? Like, it's to me, it's all about what you do with it. The way I look at it is like, I actually had this with a record. I found this particular sort of like garage synth sample that I'd never heard used before. It was from a really old pack. And I thought, the pack's about 7 years old. Nobody's going to be using this now. It's all, because it's like somebody, it would have been rinsed.
Down.
It would have been rinsed and I've just found it. And it was actually a track out on Simmer Black, and Low Stepper loved it and brilliant and everything like that. And I had like 3 people contact me, and they're like sending me YouTube clips, not even signed to a label, from like 7 years ago, going, bro, you've ripped my track off. And I'm like, okay, mate, respectfully. They're like, we want paying. I'm like, mate, it's from a sample pack. I'm like, anybody can use it. Somebody can use it after me. It's like, I don't own the rights to it.
No, absolutely not.
It's just like, I'm like, well, firstly, you've just put it on YouTube. Nobody owns it. I'm like, it's just fucking, you've just uploaded it yourself. And bad really. But mate, I just think, like, I'd say to like anybody who's listening to this, I know it's quite a lot of stuff about it at the minute. It's like, like labels saying they don't accept stuff from Splice and this, that, and the other. And it's like, really? It's like
that's been one of my biggest kind of learning curves. I've been in talks with some pretty big labels, and they like my material. Some of them they've signed and it's all good, but then some of them was like, with a Splice sample, would rather not go with it, would rather, and I guess from their point of view is, if they're going to invest money into the record, they really don't want someone just being able to rip it off straight away. And that's why you often just might get a little bit of pushback. But, on the flip side of that, look at someone like John Summit. He literally has made his career on a couple of big tracks. One of them was Forgotten One, which was a sample from an old record. And then the Deep End was a sample pack from Splice. And they're arguably some of his biggest tracks that launched his career. And so it's worked for him, and that was released on Defected. And so
that other one, Thin Line.
The Thin Line,
that's an 80s sample. That vocal is an 80s tune. Who's it by? I forget, but it's an 80s tune. And so to me, I just think there's no boundaries. And like what you're saying, as an example, do you remember the tune that came out by Left Wing and Cody, Feel It, years ago? It got really big. I listened to an interview. That was actually a sample, and he had it re-sung. Might have changed a few words around that. So, like, actually, if there is something in the track, and if you're at a stage with your artist career and those big labels think, it's definitely got something, they'll probably, I hear loads of times, they'll actually work with you to get it re-sung, and do you know what I mean? So
no, that is what I have found. If they feel like it's got potential, they will work with you on it. If they feel like it's worth the while, and it can be. Do you know what I mean? So because it's quite difficult to find a vocalist that can sometimes match the same vibe and to get the same result, and to get, because it's almost disappointing to, you wouldn't want to remake the record with a vocal that you didn't think was as good as the original sample, but sometimes you have to make a little bit of sacrifice with that, because at the end of the day, some of these old classic samples that you're using, sung by some of the greatest singers of all time. Do you know what I mean? And it can be a little bit difficult. So but like, absolutely, if you've got a good idea, you pitch it to a label and see where it goes. If anything, it puts your name out there and they recognize you as a good artist. I've had quite a few labels sort of say, it's really good, we really like the track, but we're not going to move forward because of the sample. It's too much work for us, but please keep sending us music. It sounds good. You're going to come along with something that is decent, and we want to hear more. So,
well, mate, 100%. I learned something the other day. Say, do you know the tune that come out from Chris Lorenzo not a little while ago called, California Dreaming? The Mums and Papas thing. Well, I listened to a podcast. He was on Will Clark's podcast, and I found out a question I wanted to know actually, because obviously when you turn the radio on, there's a lot of new tracks from artists that are actually, the vocals are the same as old tracks, but they've had them resung. And actually, how that, because I wondered, like, I wonder how he's got round like the mamas and papas situation, because I thought, fucking hell, I can't see them like giving that away easily, because obviously back in the day, probably quite a big record. Well, how it works is if you have it resung, then you don't have to clear the sample, you just give away the publishing rights.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's how it works. Yeah. So like that was quite interesting, because I hear there's you know, like there's loads of tunes that I keep hearing on the radio that have had like more commercial dance.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Or records made out of them. And I'm thinking, how the hell how have they managed to get around that one? And it's, well, they haven't. You don't need to. So
just get it resent, and it does open. Still have to go through publishing, like you say, but it's a lot easier than trying to get the actual original sample clearance. Yeah, for sure.
You also, you know, if it's a tune in which people know and you're looking to break into that more commercial arena, well, by the nature of it, people are going to connect with that better because they already know the track. So I thought it's actually a really smart way to do
it. Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't think Joel Corrier or someone like this is going to watch this, mate. But if he does, apologies, Joel. But you know, that sort of artist, you know what I mean? Where basically it's more like commercial
music, definitely. Yeah.
So, mate, we're sort of getting towards the end. I wanted to ask you about, obviously, you spoke a little bit about what you got in the pipeline. I don't imagine you can probably elaborate too much more on that at the minute, or?
Well, I mean, I can say that the first record that I am bringing out is going to be on 25th of February. It's called In My Soul. It's going to be released on Mixmasters Red. It's only going to be, I think it's literally, it's quite a new label, but their first release did really, really well, got into the top 10 on Beatport. And so they're they know what they're doing. They're a really credible label. So that's going to be my first release with them on the 25th. And then I've got another couple of releases coming through sort of like a bit later, but I can't unfortunately tell you about those just yet. But yeah, if you keep up with my socials and stuff, I'll be posting all about it on there.
So very understandable, mate. I didn't know how much you'd be able to elaborate on that, because I know it's, you know, you have to be a little bit careful. 3 pieces of advice that you could give somebody breaking into the industry, or what would you say?
I think we touched on it before. One would be, think about yourself as an artist in general, you know, and have a bit of a brand identity, and trying to, I didn't get that at first, but like in my later years of learning, you know, with the socials and things like that, I think it really is important to have like a bit of an identity that people connect with. On that same note, though, don't try and pretend to be something that you're not. I kind of feel like there are quite a lot of people, not a lot, but a few people that I see that kind of like maybe sort of like pretending to be something they're not. But I don't think that really works. I think you just got to be yourself, open up to who you are, and just show like kind of like be an artist and stand for something, you know, have something to say through yourself, through your image, through your music, and just have that sort of like echoing through kind of like everything that you do. And I think you'll do pretty well if that comes from the heart. If you make music from the heart, and then you know, I think you'll connect with people who are similar minded. I think that's like a big thing. I'd say for anybody who's like just starting out wanting to be a DJ, just also get yourself into production. And I think we mentioned this before, but you know, through the shift of culture at the moment, you know, if you all the big artists, all the big people that are making waves, you look at them, you go on their Spotify, they've got tracks, they've done successful music, and that, you know, that isn't by accident. That's a route to people want to listen to your music that you've made. So, you know, if you want to break into the industry, I think that's definitely the way forward, and it's something that you just kind of just have to do these days. I don't think there are still a few DJs that don't produce that much, but they are few and far between. And then 3, probably like advice for people trying to break in, and then this is something that I'm still getting used to and learning, is just networking. Like, for instance, myself and you, like, we met at that night where we played in London, and it's just these connections, these friendships. I would say all of the records that I've signed and are going to be released are through meeting people. It doesn't have to be, it can be face to face. Some of them are face to face, but some of them have just, been reaching out on socials, jumping on Zoom calls with people. And, it's just any way that you can sort of like reach out and connect with people. When you go into parties, go to the after parties, talk to the DJs, talk to the promoters, all that's just like so critical to kind of like break into the scene, because you can be a brilliant DJ, you can have mega tunes, but if it's just you and your mates playing them in your bedroom and no one ever hears them, then you're not going to really break into the club scene.
Yeah, mate, 3 wicked pieces of advice, and like, I can, like, a lot of this interview, I can relate to a lot of things that you're saying, because like your first point about being an artist, it's so important to try and get your head around that as early as possible if you can. And then it's quite weird actually, because when I first like realized that, it was like, oh shit, like, it's not really about being a good DJ now. I was like, oh, okay, right, this has changed a bit. Like, a few years after that, I was like, fuck. I was like, yeah, okay. So, but I've got all these record boxes and nobody gives a shit. It's like trying to identify who you are as an artist and what you want to say. I actually found very, very difficult at the start, and how I actually, and it took me a good year or so to even get to like the way I think about it now, which in the end, where I sort of went back to, and I don't know how you've sort of come to your idea of where you're at now with it, is I started thinking to myself, well, what do I actually like? Like I started to think, like, because I was thinking like, oh wow, what sort of music should I make? So I do like different sorts of subgenres of house music, and I was like, well, but what are you most connected to?
Yeah.
That's probably a good indicator.
Yeah.
And like, for me, it's all about that 90s sound. That's the whole thing. It's
listen to one of your records, you hear that through.
It's quite raw. It's quite it's all very similar sounds, pianos, organs, those sort of garagey synth sounds, the more skippy drums. I don't tend to go for the sort of groovy bass lines as much, because I just think that that's like, I want to try and get away from that. So I go a bit more subby on things to keep it a bit more naughty. So that's how I got to my place. But I would say, like, a little bit of advice off the back of what you're saying is try and get to the core of what it is that you actually like, so like that might be like what got you into it, or if you search deep enough, you'll know what is it. And then I would say a really good starting place for what sort of music you want to make and how you want to portray yourself is probably that. It may develop from there,
Definitely. I think it kind of like, for me, music's like quite an emotional thing. It probably is for most people. But I thought about, okay, so I do make quite a bit of not a massively broad range, but I like some days I might make more of like a piano-y house vibe. Some days it's a little bit more melodic. But it's always got a general theme of, like I was going back to before, it's going to have energy. It's going to give you a positive feel. It's going to be a little bit uplifting. It's going to have like that little bit of edginess in the drums where it's not soft. It's pretty, you could play it like peak time. It's going to have that kind of like element to it. And even though I've got, like I say, a bit of a broad spectrum of, I might make piano house, I might make some tech house, but it's all going to have that same overall feeling and vibe. And that's the kind of, that's my kind of go-to sort of personality. That's who I am as a person. I'm quite a sort of like positive person, and I feel like that's what you need to kind of portray through your music and through your image.
Definitely, 100%, mate. It's been wicked speaking to you, I've got to say.
I really enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
We probably could have carried on for another bloody 5 hours, but you know, at some point we have to come to an end. So, mate, where can people find you if they want to know a little bit more about you?
Yes, for sure. Probably the main one is Instagram. All my handles are Jack Wood Music. So on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Sorry, my Twitter's Jack Wood Music 1 because Jack Wood Music was already taken. Also, I'm just going to be launching a YouTube channel very, very soon. I'm going to have a mix that I've done, which is a 2 hour 40 mix that I've recorded. It's a multi-camera with a drone mix that was recorded outside last summer. It was at a demolition site. Like
I think I've seen a few clips of it on your Instagram. Yeah,
and
wicked.
a few teasers. I would have liked to have posted it a lot sooner, but we've had a few sort of like technical issues and making sure that the video actually matches up the music and all sorts of bits. I won't bore you with that, but that's going to come out very soon. So I've launched, launching a YouTube channel over the next couple of weeks, and that's going to be a big feature to kind of like go alongside my first tracks that are being released, and some of those tracks are on the mix and stuff. So yeah, that's another place to sort of like find me in my music, and then once my tracks are released, you'll be able to find me on Spotify as well. But I've got nothing on there currently because I've not released anything just yet.
Wicked, mate. It's been fantastic, honestly, and I'm 100% sure that you're going to do really good things, mate. I've listened to your music and what have you, and obviously through getting to know you, and yeah, I'm pretty sure, mate, you've got a bright future. So it's going to be all good.
Appreciate it. Good.
Wicked.
You, mate, you keep knocking out them house tunes. I'll go for them all day long.
It's got to swing back round at some point, mate. I mean, fucking hell.
100%. You can't lose it, mate. Can't lose it.
I might be like in a wheelchair and have grey hair by that stage.
I've got a few now, mate.
Right, mate. It's been great speaking to you. Signing off, dude.
Yeah, man. Sounds. See you later.